So we'll do things a little differently today. I was going to go through the news. I'm still going to do that as we are live here at about 3:30 Eastern Standard Time. But I wanted to talk about this book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. This book was written by Caleb Maupin, who is the founder and the leader of the Center for Political Innovation. Um, I guess I would describe it, and I apologize if I'm botching it, but I would describe it as like a think tank, post-communist think tank. He's a former, I guess he would consider himself a communist at one point, but now he says he's kind of moved almost beyond that as an innovationist. But you could go to his YouTube channel if you just type in Caleb Maupin. That's Caleb Maupin Maupin, and you'll see plenty of material on him, and including his YouTube and his videos and live evening chats. But I just wanted to quickly talk about the book. I'm currently reading actually a book that I got. Uh, I just picked up, or I just got delivered yesterday, that I'm reading, called Socialism Betrayed: Behind the Collapse of the Soviet Union. And I'm doing a little bit of self study on the some of the backdrop of Marx, Engels, Mao, just trying to really brush up and learn a little bit more, kind of enhance my understanding of socialism, of the ideals of behind communism, and just understanding some of the principles of like their beliefs in markets, economies, social science, things of that nature. I did reread, or audiobooked, I should say. I read it a long time ago, but I audiobooked the Communist Manifesto. Um, which was very interesting this time around. And I've been listening to some of Das Capital, and right now I'm kind of going through a list of things, but I did just complete this book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, and I'll just give you a brief overview. I mean, I recommend reading the book, and certainly there's a lot of interviews he's done about this topic. But essentially, what Caleb does is he really breaks down. Um, I would say he breaks down almost the genealogy of neoconservatism. And why is that so important? Well, in 2025, most of us will clearly remember, if not understand, that the talking points and the foreign policy that has dominated the United States, and maybe even the entirety of the West for that matter, since at least 9/11, but I would say probably going back even further than that, has been the philosophy of the neoconservatives. And what Caleb does very well is he breaks down, as I call it, the genealogy. He goes back and explains really the origins. Who are the forefathers of neoconservatism? And what you find is they weren't technically conservatives at all. Essentially, he explains obviously who Trotsky is and Trotsky's story, individually, and then his relationship with, or his adversarial relationship with Stalin, his relationship as the underling under Lenin, when he joined Lenin uh, uh, during the revolution, his then journey post Lenin's death and being essentially sent into exile by Stalin, and then his alignment against the Soviet Union while still being a socialist, still being a communist. Um, Trotsky's evolution at and where he stood, even with the United States government, in a sense, where he was being used as a proxy by the Republicans against FDR, and then even being used as a proxy by the fascists against the Soviet Union. And eventually, the break that some of the Trotskyite, the followers of Trotsky, would have with Trotsky himself, um, where they would form another arm of Trotskyism, another international, but this one being one that is not at odds with the American government. which was, I guess, the breaking point. And this group post World War II and during the beginning of the Cold War would essentially decide that they felt the new left, which is what they were, that they were unhappy with the left wing or the Democrats' um, lack of fervor and lack of aggression in handling the communists, with the Soviet communists. So the Trotskyites basically transformed themselves into the leading voices of the new right, which becomes the neoconservatives. And he traces the genealogy through people like Irving Kristol, who's the father of the well known Bill Kristol, who you see on Fox News a lot. He traces one of the forefathers of the neoconservative movement post Trotsky, obviously being Max Shachtman, who's lesser known outside by I would say the general viewer of the news, but a lot of Shachtman's disciples and followers were certainly well known to those in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Um, but it really, a lot of the political thought and the foreign policy strategy, the what is it, the Center for a New American Century, things like that, really all tied up in this neoconservative ideology. And now I'm breaking off back into my own opinion here. What's sad and very interesting to me is that the neoconservative philosophy that's one end of it. And then you have this progressive side, which is the what I consider to be faux democratic socialism, is the other side, which is like the Democrat counter. But essentially, you have fake socialists and fake conservatives. And these two sides dominate our political thought. And if you think about it, that's why it's not that nothing changes. But if you think about the course of the last, 50 years, when a Democrat or a Republican is in office, does the foreign policy really change? Just think about that for a second. I know this will offend people who are Democrats, it will offend people that are Republicans, it'll offend people that think that they have a grasp on domestic politics, but if you just think about this for a second, whether it's Bush, especially, who really ran things under Reagan, whether it's Bush himself, Clinton, Bush's son, Obama, Trump, and then Biden, the majority of the people in government and the majority of the even the presidents themselves, their foreign policy doesn't shift much. Now, you could come up with excuses for it, but I think one of the foundations for that is the fact that within the two dominant political parties, you have these factions of neoconservatives and these fake progressives. Again, some of them, they call themselves Democrat socialists. They call whatever you want to call them. It doesn't matter. They don't actually believe in the root of their title. They don't believe in socialism. They don't believe in conservatism. There's nothing conservative about the Republicans the last 50 years. I don't see Taft. Okay? And there's nothing, certainly nothing liberal, but especially nothing socialist about the Democratic Socialists. I mean, they're not socialists. They don't actually believe in that stuff. And they hate the countries that practice those beliefs. They don't like Venezuela. Our relationship with Venezuela never improves. Our relationship with North Korea doesn't improve. Our relationship with Vietnam, China, is certainly not with the Soviet Union when they were around. I mean, and certainly not with the countries post-Soviet Union. I never hear anybody in our government talking pleasantly about Viktor Orban in Hungary. I don't hear them saying nice things about Belarus. I don't hear them now. Ukraine, which has become a vassal state after the 2014 coup, they'll talk about that. But certainly all the other states forget it, and especially not Russia itself. I mean, that absolutely, you don't hear a peep, nothing positive is said about them by anybody. So it's interesting to me because what Caleb does in this book, which I highly, highly, highly recommend, Um, you see, truly identifies the influence that Trotsky had on the conservative, quote unquote, conservative movement in America, on politics in America. And it really highlights why we don't have a great foreign policy change when political parties change, administrations change, and personnel change in our federal government. And if you look at the European Union today, if you look at the body politic of the universities today, if you look at the intellectual class today, the intelligentsia of the Northeast, who I grew up around, unfortunately, in New York, I mean, they're riddled with these former Trotskyites. I could smell it. I didn't know what these people were when I was growing up. I went to school with many of them. I've been around some of these people. I think even some of the people that he's named in the book I've probably interacted with, unfortunately, but I didn't know what they were. But now understanding who Trotsky was, understanding more of the depth of him, his views, and his influence, I fully understand. And it is amazing to see the influence. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Again, I want to give praise and credit to Caleb and his amazing job that he did with the book. I highly recommend it. I think it's extremely relevant today, and it's something that everybody should take a look at. All right, let's get into the news. So I've seen this a couple of times. I want to find some more details on this, but the fourth plenary session of the 20th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China adopted the recommendations of the CPC Central Committee for formulating the 15th five-year plan for economic and social development. China will further deepen reform comprehensively and promote high standard opening up. Well, that's there. I'm sure there'll be more details coming out about this, but this is going to be a big story over the next day or so because now we're starting to understand what the new 5-year plan is going to be. And, for those who don't understand, the 5-year plan is something that was adopted, obviously, from the Soviet era. Um, the the Chinese still adhere to this concept. And what's interesting about the 5-year plan is that it for the rest of the world, I think it gives you an idea of what China believes they internally want to focus on. And some people may brush it off and say, "Ah, whatever," but I mean it is important because I mean China is an important country, extremely important, but also it gives you an idea of how a state that is so efficient and so well run that they have a general outline and they attack it. One example of this is that one of their goals of the last 5-year plan was 6% GDP growth per average. And I think they ended up with 5%. I mean, to do that during the COVID era is remarkable. Um, and this wouldn't happen if you didn't have the direction and the organization and the efficiency and the fact that they're politicians. Okay, and this is one of the things that is most impressive and attractive to me as an individual who lives in a country and in a state where you don't get any of this. Their politicians must perform. Okay, the president, the provisional leaders, the Politburo, everybody performs. And what I mean by that is, if they come up with plans and ideas, if it's not working, they make adjustments, they change it. They don't just accept failure. They don't sit back and watch things happen. They would never sit. If the Chinese, imagine this, if the Chinese were allowed to run an American state for a month, I guarantee you there'd be no homelessness by the end of the month. Why? They do not allow things like that to happen. Now they can't control the weather. They can't control everything. But I'm telling you right now that the nature with which we accept failure in the West from our politicians, The constant, whether it's corruption, laziness, stupidity, you name it, across the board, it's unacceptable in their culture. It's unacceptable in their country. We could learn so much from them. It's ridiculous. Let's see here. BRICS News. Chinese state oil majors suspend purchases of seaborne Russian oil after the U.S. imposed sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil, Moscow's two biggest oil companies, Reuters reports. Um, okay, this is a little odd because about an hour and a half ago, I thought I saw some news that the Chinese had officially stated they would not follow this this embargo on Russian oil. Which, by the way, I understand the president. He takes on a lot of the characteristics in a positive way of some things that he sees overseas, like the golden share, right? The golden share. Which is basically state-owned enterprise, where the United States takes a golden share of Intel for like 10% of Intel, and I think those are good moves, right? Focusing on reindustrialization, focusing uh, on AI, focusing on finding how do we process rare earth minerals, right? Things like this. These are good things. Diversifying our energy sources. All these things are good, right? But then something absolutely stupid and something that you don't see the Chinese do, that you don't see the Russians do. Well, one, they don't get involved in nonsense like what's going on in the Middle East. But then you have this. Why do we tell Russia, come to the negotiating table, let's have a peace with Ukraine? And then at the same time, we're telling them, oh, and we're putting an embargo on you. Why would you do that? If you want to negotiate, negotiate. You're not going to strong arm the Russians. The Chinese, even if they did follow this, which I'm not sure if this is accurate. Even if they did, you don't think that they're going to, behind closed doors, you don't think they're going to continue to support the Russians? They just set up a whole back channel route through the Arctic to transport goods. Do you really think they're going to stop? Come on. I don't understand what Trump is doing on that one. NATO launched more than 10,000 air raids on Libya in 2011, over 500,000 civilian casualties. When they were questioned about the civilian casualties, they insisted that it was collateral damages and that it happens in wars. The country that had one of the highest standard of living in the world at the time, they bombed the country back to the Stone Age. Libya's 42 years of progress, stability, and development was destroyed. This is why this is why BRICS countries are deathly afraid of NATO and the United States. The United States and NATO can sit there and smile and say, well, 500,000. Think about it. We lost 500,000 troops in World War II. We lost about 496,000 troops in World War II. Just think about that for a second. And the air raids in Libya caused over 500,000 casualties. We killed more people in 2011 in Libya than in the entire participation of World War II for American troops. I'm going to say that one more time. We killed more people in Libya in 2011 than all the American troops casualties combined for World War II. What a fucking disgrace. And this again, what do we just say about foreign policy? This is in Barack Obama's second term, where he and Hillary Clinton and all these other fake progressive, fake conservatives decide that they needed to kill Gaddafi after he surrendered his nuclear program. They needed to kill him because he was a threat somehow. No, the threat was he was forming a Pan-African alliance, and he had $7 billion worth of gold in reserves. And Hillary Clinton and company and the French under Sarkozy thought that this was absolutely unacceptable, and they couldn't allow him to do that. So a socialist leader in Africa who was unifying Africa, who raised the standard of living, who was taking care of his people, doing everything right, gets bombed to death, gets murdered, has 500,000 of his own people killed. by the first ever African, quote unquote, American president in US history. So even when we're led by somebody who looks like somebody in Africa, you still get the same old NATO aggressive nonsense. JB Pritzker has announced a special commission that will be dedicated to doxing, stalking, and prosecuting federal agents. They have inflamed. Okay, so this is really, I've seen this a couple times. Basically, the former mayor of Chicago and Pritzker, they've talked about this. They they want to ensure that um the agents are basically scared off of doing their job. For a group of people that protested no king, right? And basically said, well, we want no kings. I don't remember a king ever allowing people in their own government to defy the law as it's written and threaten other government employees, who they claim, by the way, to be all for government employees. But these government employees they hate. They love all the other three-letter agencies: CIA, FBI, DHS, IRS, NIH, you name it. But the one three-letter agency they're not so comfortable with is ICE. ICE, baby. Yeah, I find that very odd. I mean, look, I don't love chasing down illegals in cities and hauling them away from their families. I'm not loving that. But here are a couple of problems. All right, number one, it's easier to make a mess than it is to clean a mess. So it's easier to bring in 15 million people than it is to deport. Number two, I don't remember any of the Democrats who are stunting now doing this against Obama when he deported like 5 million people. That's sad. Number three, I'm not really understanding why the governor of Illinois is openly calling for attacks on individuals who work for the government when they're just doing their job. If you want to debate the law, then why don't you debate the law? Congress could have this debate and they could change the law so that these people wouldn't be deported. But that's not what's happening. Not to mention that they don't even know who they are. So it's very strange. Um, I think you got to remove the gang members, but when it comes to the individuals, it gets sensitive. I fully understand it. It's difficult, and I wish there was another way. But according to Tom Hammond, and again, I would love for them to debate this rather than to threaten people. Hammond made it very clear that they target the gangs and the criminals, like the people who commit a second crime, right? And we've had many examples of American citizens being murdered by illegal immigrants who've been arrested multiple times. So you could be arrested as an illegal multiple times in these places and they won't do anything about it. But here's one of the odd things that I noticed. Hammond said, when we go into a city, a sanctuary city, the reason that you see us on the streets having to hunt down people and remove people, and it's a very sad and aggressive action, is because the city or the state doesn't cooperate. So when somebody commits a crime who's an illegal, instead of them keeping them in jail where we would come and pick them up, they don't cooperate. So we have to go out in the streets and hunt them down. Now, if they were to just cooperate, would we not see the ICE raids on these different locations? I don't know. I would assume we'd see less of it. But again, I think this topic should be debated. Now, personally, I mean, I understand the law is the law. So I can't tell anybody to violate the law because I have a personal opinion. I can't do that. But here's what I would say: when you look at countries like Vietnam, North Korea, China, even India, the penalty for illegal immigration in India, I think, is 8 years hard labor. The penalty for illegal immigration in China is 2 years in jail. The penalty for illegal immigration to North Korea is death. So in other countries that we look to and use as examples for many things, these countries are much more strict than we are when it comes to illegal immigration. But we can make the right reforms and use people, because I think we need people. We don't need less people in America. We need more because our birth rates are so low. But we have to have open debate rather than threats. And the threats just lead to anarchy. Let's see. Keir Starmer pledges another 10 million I guess, 10 million euros or pounds to mosque and says says Muslim hatred of any kind will not be tolerated. Well, I mean, no, it shouldn't be tolerated. I mean, there's no reason to hate anybody. There's no reason to hate random people by ethnicity. Being a certain ethnicity should not be a qualifier for hatred. Um, what I would assume Keir Starmer would understand, and maybe he doesn't understand it, is that the anger that the British people feel towards the Muslim community is not for every Muslim that ever existed, but rather for the fact that the government seems to favor Muslim immigrants and doesn't have any empathy for its own people going through extremely high rates of unemployment, financial struggles, housing crisis, and also high crime. And in many cases, even when a crime is committed by a migrant, a Muslim migrant, the response from the government has been that if you post something about it, if you put a British flag up, you can be arrested. That kind of action breeds hatred. So he's basically what you call gaslighting in this case, and he could care less about the Muslim population in the UK. I can promise you that. Bu- 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 And what's happening here? We freezing out? We freezing out? What's going on? Hold on a sec.
Regarding the sanctions um, regarding Russia, I think it's an important sign of strength that we are aligned here.
I apologize, folks. I can't listen to stupid for very long. Um, Sanctions on Russia are not a sign of strength. It's a sign of irrational behavior. And if you know anything about Russia, which I suggest go online, you could go on YouTube, you can go anywhere, you could see this very quickly. They have had no impact. The Russian people do not feel the heat from your stupid sanctions. Not only that, if anything, the sanctions have driven Russia into a better relationship, a more committed relationship with BRICS. So the sanctions are stupid. If you just sanction everybody you don't like, you create a coalition of people being sanctioned. What a stupid policy. Okay. China's success in the lifting of 840 million people out of poverty is unprecedented, says Jackson Hinkle. You name it, China leads it, annexing the West Bank and the looming Trump war on Venezuela, a new Vietnam. Okay, yeah, I was watching some of this earlier. Um, yeah, no, I mean, look, of course, communism with Confucian characteristics. What do you need in America? You need some form of socialism with American characteristics. And here's the thing, right? And this is something I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about. There's some coalition, a little bit, between some communists, some innovationists, Caleb Maupin, and some libertarians, right? But what I think you really need to understand is libertarians ultimately want extremely limited government. Leave me alone, right? Live and let live. Communism ultimately is a stateless society, but you can't reach the state of communism while you have many bad state actors out there and you have a community of people that still need state protection and want to have economies that are somewhat kept in check. And it's not clear to me, and this is getting a little philosophical and maybe it's sad to say, it's not clear to me that you can have a communist or even a socialist state in the same landmass or even the same hemisphere or even a different hemisphere as a capitalist state, for the only reason that there will always be a tendency for friction, and that friction might lead to war. I don't know if they can get along. Now, there have been communist states that have fought each other, so I'm not saying that eliminates war. It doesn't. But in 2025, what you're seeing now out of the West is a rebuttal against any country or system that doesn't fully cooperate, especially from a banking perspective. with the Western banking system. And I just don't know if you'll see if you'll see a calm between capitalism and communism, but I do think for individuals, especially living in the West, that there's some camaraderie between people who are consider themselves libertarian or libertarian leaning, and people who are communists, from the standpoint that you see, whether you agree with each other on everything or not, you can agree that you both see the flaws in the system that we are living in. And the flaws in the system that we are living in are both controlled wholly by the Democrats and the Republicans and the do nothings in government. So we're kind of on the same page in that regard. And I'm someone who I considered myself like a Ron Paul libertarian for many years, but my frustration with Libertarian Party in the standpoint that and the libertarian a lot of libertarian people was just like we're just not doing anything. And I didn't see resolutions to certain problems occurring. And it's not any disrespect. I just think for me, I've taken another step forward, or another step away from the system, and my step further from the system has led me to revisiting things like Marx and Engels, and revisiting what's actually going on in China, what's actually going on in Vietnam, what's actually going on in North Korea, what's going on in Venezuela, what does socialism really mean? What does Marxism really mean? And that revisiting has led me just further away from the system and slightly further away from some of my previous libertarian concepts. But anyway, that's not really important. French citizens to pay global taxes. Okay, what is this? France just officially proposed global taxation for the national budget of 2026. French citizens will pay taxes on their global income if they move to a region with a tax of 40% lower than France's. Interesting. So the European Union or the French are they just want to tax people who move away from their country. Yeah. Okay. Well, that'll lead to people just giving away their citizenship. So if you move to Russia, you move to China, which I want to visit Russia and China, and I want to get a home, rent a home in those places, or buy a home in those places because I want a home in bricks very badly. So China, Russia, if you're hearing me, Vietnam, same thing. If you're hearing me, understand I'm an American citizen. I desperately want to rent a home in your place, in your land, and I want my family to be able to come there. I don't know if I can live there full time because I have commitments here and I have other family here, but I do desperately want to be able to come there freely as much as possible, and bring my family, and have a place there, because I don't believe that the West is the future at all. So please, if you hear me, I am more than willing, and I will bring all my talents. I'm studying IT infrastructure. I have an MBA. I've worked in banking, financial services. Willing to do whatever it takes. So just putting that out there. Um, Secretary Bessent says America's golden age is underway, and the best is yet to come. I look. Scott Bessent's a very smart man. And he's breaking barriers too. And not that this is important, but he is, I think he's the first homosexual Treasury Secretary, and he's a very intelligent man, very successful. But I just want to say, I think it's great to be positive about your country. Like the Chinese are positive when they put out their new 5 year plan. I think it's important for America to say things like, "Hey, golden age," all that. I don't have a problem with that. I just I don't quite understand though how you can declare it now when nothing positive has happened. And I would argue that until you resolve your silly trade argument with China, and you come to the negotiating table and you settle that, and when you have trade deals with all those countries, and you get away from wasting resources on arguing with Zelensky and Netanyahu, when you start focusing on American domestication of industrialization, and when you start focusing on vocational training. When you take control of your currency back, which we haven't had since the 1800s or early part of the 20th century, I should say. When you do that, then you could talk about the golden age. But until you do any of those things, I just don't know how you could quite say that to people who are struggling. So that I'll leave it there. But Britain is being invaded. Muslims with bats, knives, and swords out on the streets hunting British patriots with no police intervention. Is there any kind of video of this, or let's see what's going on? You see people marching the street. Is that a knife? Is that a sword? Why is he carrying a sword? Are you allowed to carry a sword in the
Go through law something. Go through law
UK? I don't understand what's going on here. Okay, this is just odd. I'll be honest, it's hard to understand what's happening in the video, but I hope that's not the case. What is this? It's funny how some Americans think posting an insulting picture of their country's president equals freedom. Guys like Aaron will argue America is the best because I can write a tweet stating Donald Trump is an asshole. That's real freedom. But you know what's better? Having a president that's not an asshole. Yeah, why is he making fun of President Z? I don't understand. Who is this guy? Building the future of manufacturing. Who is this guy? Building the future of manufacturing. Am I supposed to know who this is, or I don't know? This is very odd. I don't. Yeah, I don't get that. Starting to feel like a lawless zone already. What happened to Tokyo's order? Okay, so again, yeah, you're going to see a lot of immigrants in Japan get deported because the sentiment there is like if you let people in, you get a lot of this. And it's just sad because it's hard to argue. Like, look at the dirty the street is there, people fighting. I mean, just terrible. I don't understand this one. I saw this earlier. He's blaming the arrests by the FBI on the NBA's gambling ring on Trump. Stephen A is out of his depth in the shallow end of the pool, but this is about as stupid as it gets. The investigation by the FBI into the gambling ring in the NBA started in 2023. That was under Joe Biden. So totally different administration with different heads of the FBI. But Stephen A. wants to defend the NBA because ESPN has a huge contract with them, and he's covered the NBA intimately. And of course, the people involved are black, so he's going to go off and turn it into a thing. Stephen A. is just he thinks he's smart because he's loud and talks a lot, but that's just a stupid comment. Zionism is over. This isn't just about freeing Palestine, it's about freeing the world and restoring humanity. Chuck Baldwin. Well, it's certainly losing its steam in America because unfortunately, people just haven't been able to stomach what's been going on in the Middle East. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the effect it had. Yeah, Poland needs to rethink its strategy. The Poles, I don't know why they were being so angry and aggressive with Hungary, but at the same time, now they have the same sabotage being happening in their oil and gas companies as happening in Hungary and Czechoslovakia or in Croatia. I forget which other country it was other than Hungary. But yeah, I mean, it's obvious who's doing it. Ukraine is I don't understand what the hell they're doing. You're not going to get support by doing that. It's not you get sympathy. Everybody assumes it. American doctor goes over how Barack Obama destroyed American healthcare. Before Obamacare, a family of four, $13,000 per premium, 3,000 deductible. Yeah, I mean his healthcare edits didn't help, but let's be honest. What killed healthcare in America was the fact that people in is that our system is broken. It's about capital. It's not about healthcare. It's all about extracting every penny. and that system just doesn't work. Just gets people killed. Oh, come on. Oh, it's a joke. This is Leon, France, destroyed by Macron and his wife. Yeah, come on. Yeah, I was gonna say the Russians aren't being destroyed by sanctions. Are so ridiculous. T. James is following House Democrats by launching a portal for people to submit photos and videos of ICE agents to review potential. So Latita, so she's being indicted for mortgage fraud, and her response is to try to dox ICE agents who are government officials. Um, yeah, they got to shut down the ICE tracker. That you got to arrest the people. That's unacceptable. You can't be hurting innocent people doing their job. Um, All right, we're gonna call it right here. We'll do some more of this. I'll do another one of these tomorrow, and I'll talk about some other things. But I really appreciate everybody. And if there's anything specifically you want me to talk about, please let me know. Thank you very much.